Hello, it's Lisa Dickey from Dickey's Cooking School, and today we're going to make a delicious tomato soup. It's going to be made with canned tomatoes, onion, white kidney beans, and we are going to augment it. We're going to add to it Parmesan cheese, a bit of basil, and we're going to add a little bit of kale, so we have a little bit of vegetable in it as well. We're just going to season it with salt and pepper, and also I forgot to add, we're going to add some tomato paste just as a thickener. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is saute our onion. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to cut an onion. When you see an onion, it's got this little tail. If we keep our tail intact, our onion will stay intact as well. So number one, we're going to cut the end off the onion. And so now we have a nice flat surface to work from. We're going to cut through the top center, and we're just going to take this first layer off. Now we have our onion like this. We're going to slice it this way. Not going to go through to the end, but just going to go close to the end, okay? And now we're going to slice it this way. And because the onion has rings, our onion now is nicely, now we get to the end like that and it gets kind of squishy. I'm going to turn it around and go this way. And then let's throw that aside. And we'll just spice that up a little bit, okay? So now we've got half of our onion cut. We're going to put 2 tablespoons of olive oil in the bottom of the pan. To be honest, I never, ever measure olive oil. I just pour enough to fully cover, give a nice coating on the bottom of the pan. I'm gonna say that's about 2 tablespoons. It's close enough. I'm gonna put my heat on 2 out of 10, so low. And I'm gonna get the first little bit of our onions in. See this little bit here that it's got some brown on it? I'm gonna cast that aside because that's chewy and leathery and it's not really nice. So we're gonna get those onions in, and then I'm gonna quickly do the second half and drop that in too. So while our onions are sauteing, it's a good idea to just put a little bit of salt on. What that does is that helps draw the water out of the onions and make them sweat. And the sweat creates a nice liquid barrier on the bottom of the pan that's going to protect the onions from getting scorched. Now, I think I forgot to mention, we need chicken stock as well. If you don't have chicken stock, you could use water. You could use water and then add a tablespoon of miso paste at the end. Don't boil your soup with miso paste because you'll cook the bacteria in it, which is healthy bacteria, good for your tummy. You could also use vegetable stock, or you could use, I haven't tried it with beef stock, but it's a pretty mild flavor. I think you could give it a whirl. Okay, so they're cooking up. While they're cooking up, I'm going to just really finely mince my kale. And again, this is black kale. So I'm gonna take that center spine out. The center spine is really tough and woody. It doesn't break down easily. It doesn't taste good, and so we don't want it. We're gonna just get rid of that. So we've got our kale all lined up. We're gonna group it all together, and we're gonna snip it into really nice thin pieces. If you didn't want to use kale, you could use spinach. And of course, if you didn't want to use either kale or spinach, that's fine. Your soup's going to have some fiber, and it's going to have a little bit of protein with the white kidney beans. You could put a piece of chicken in it. You could put some cooked chicken in it as well if you wanted to add some protein. And you could just serve it with a side salad or cut some vegetables, okay? Tomatoes are actually technically a fruit. While they're not a nice big leafy green, they do have an ingredient in tomatoes, especially tomato paste and canned tomatoes, called lycopene. And lycopene is really great. It's a great immune booster, especially when it comes to sort of very serious diseases. Okay, so this is still really healthy. Okay, so that's simmering up nicely. We're gonna give it a couple more minutes, and then we're gonna add our tomatoes, our tomato paste, our white beans, Just about the end, we're going to add in our kale so it gets nice and soft. And then we're going to give it a little bit of a puree. Okay? See. Okay, so here are our onions. You can't smell them, they smell great. And they're just becoming a bit translucent. To those onions, we are going to add 396 mils of canned tomatoes. Okay? Then we're going to add 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. So those tomatoes, I actually got those tomatoes out of the freezer, so we're just gonna let them, they're gonna just cook and defrost at the same time. Then we're going to add our white kidney beans. That is gonna simmer for another 10 minutes. Then we're going to puree it. Now to puree it, you're gonna puree it either with a hand blender like this, or you're gonna really carefully transfer it into a blender, okay? So 2 things, if you're transferring it to a stand-up blender, you wanna be really careful first that it's completely latched in because it's hot, okay? And so you don't want it to spill out. And when you're transferring it in, you're gonna ladle it bit by bit. 1, so you don't get splashed, and 2, take it from someone who stains almost everything I make so you don't get tomato stains all over you, okay? So this is gonna, again, cook for about another 10 minutes. I'm gonna puree it before I add my kale because I don't like the look of the super ground up kale. It's gonna turn it into a greenish gray soup, and I'm not down with that, okay? So it's gonna puree, then I'm gonna add my kale, okay? If you're not adding any kale or spinach, you can just puree it when you're ready, okay? I'll see you in a minute. Okay, to this we're going to add 2 cups of chicken stock. Like I said, you could use vegetable stock, you could try a mushroom stock, you could use 2 cups of water, and just before you serve it, put a tablespoon or 2 of miso paste. And now we are going to puree it, okay? We're gonna blend this. So the most important thing is when you're blending it, you don't want to have it on so much of an angle that you get sprayed with hot soup, okay? That's really serious. So you're just gonna pulse it, and you're gonna pulse it in sections until it's pretty much ground up, and then you can slowly move it throughout. And if you put it on a slight angle, it'll make like a tornado, a whirlpool, okay? So it'll just kind of suck in. What you want is all of those really nice beans to get nicely pureed. White kidney beans are really excellent to puree. They're really smooth, they're not chunky. If you use chickpeas, they do get a little chunky. Chickpeas are great. So that's nicely blended. I'm gonna set that aside. We're gonna throw a bit of kale in it and just soften that up for a minute. Then we're going to finish it off with a couple of tablespoons of unsalted butter, and we're gonna top it with Parmesan cheese. Taste it to see if we need any salt and pepper. And that is our soup. This is an excellent soup. It's really good for a couple of days. If you ever wanted to pair this with homemade biscuits, biscuits are the easiest, most delicious thing you can make in the bread family, in my opinion. So we're just gonna let that soften up. And this kale, if you reheat the next day, the kale's not gonna be all mealy and piecey and gross inside, okay? Here goes our butter. Whoops, let that melt. And I'll show you at the end, and we'll top it with cheese and basil and delicious lunch that hits everything. It's got vegetable, it's got protein, it's got fiber, and it tastes really great, most importantly. See you later.